Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will DuPree. We're showing you a live shot right now from the U.S. Capitol there in D.C. A very calm day right now, but just 2 days ago, a very different story, of course. Lawmakers, including many Democrats, are now calling for President Trump to be removed by invoking the 25th Amendment. This comes after a pro-Trump mob broke into the U.S. Capitol building, overtook it, and caused lawmakers to seek shelter that day. 5 people died, including a Capitol police officer who was protecting the building. A federal homicide investigation has now been opened into his death. But we want to turn our focus back to the 25th Amendment because it is coming up in so much in conversation at this time. We thought it was important to explain how it works and what provisions it includes if it is indeed invoked. We don't have any indication right now that it will, but just in case, we want to cover our bases. Joining us right now is a constitutional law professor from UT here in Austin. We'll pull him up now. Professor Levinson, thank you so much for joining us. Again, everybody, this is Professor Sanford Levinson. He teaches law at the University of Texas at Austin School of Law and has a specialty in constitutional law. He also is a professor of government at UT. Professor, thank you for being here and providing a little bit of a civics lesson.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, first, before we jump into really the specifics of the 25th Amendment, I just want to get your reaction to everything that's unfolded this week. Share your thoughts about everything that's happened.
Oh, quite honestly, I don't think I could do that in the time that we have available because there are so many different thoughts, and many of them, quite frankly, are more political than you may want to focus on for this interview, because I do think that the chickens have come home to roost for the Republican Party, that for the last 4 years, or actually even longer than that, has either been indifferent to or really collaborated with Donald Trump in a host of lies and mendacious abuses of power. So that what is stunning about Tuesday is that he crossed yet one more line. But this is not like, the fabled headline one used to see where, polite and calm honors student suddenly kills his parents. And everybody says, oh my God, I never would have imagined he might have done that. We've been imagining Donald Trump doing things like this really quite literally for years based on what he did do. And so, he did incite the insurrection, but it's also extraordinarily important to note that he had allies, and the 2 most important allies were Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, the senators from Missouri and Texas, respectively. And I pick on them because they really are unusually well-educated, unusually smart, unusually able. Hawley went to the Yale Law School. Cruz went to the Harvard Law School. They're both very, very competent people who nonetheless, for their own reasons, chose to collaborate with what Kellyanne Conway so unforgettably called a universe of alternative facts, where they were throwing red meat to a base. They were playing with fire, and now they pretend to be shocked that the matches caused the forest fire. But no, they are as important as Donald Trump to what happened on Tuesday.
Again, if anyone is just joining us right now, Professor Sandy Levinson from the UT Austin School of Law is joining us to talk about really the 25th Amendment. I just asked him about his thoughts, but Professor, can we focus really now on the
Sure.
25th Amendment
Sure.
itself? So
Gladly.
there seems to be growing momentum, particularly among Democratic lawmakers, about the invocation of that. According to your understanding of the 25th Amendment, how does it work? What are the provisions that might likely apply in this particular instance?
Okay, there's only one provision, that's Section 4. The other three simply say that if the president dies or otherwise creates a vacancy, the vice president becomes president. And it also allows a way by which a president can voluntarily transfer duties to the vice president. And this has happened, for example, when presidents have had minor surgery. So I think that George H.W. Bush transferred his power to, I'm freezing right now, on his vice president, Dan Quayle, when Bush was having, I think, a colonoscopy. But then you get to the really important section, which is Section 4, which really deals with the involuntary transfer of power. And the fact is that Section 4 is drafted in a way that only lawyers could possibly love, and most lawyers, I think, don't. Because, first of all, it has never, in the now 50 years since it was added to the Constitution, it's never been implemented. So nobody really and truly knows how Section 4 would work, because it does contemplate the possibility of what, for lack of a better term, can be called a palace revolt of the president's vice president and cabinet against the president, him or herself. Now, in the back of the minds of the drafters, I think they were imagining if John F. Kennedy had lived. The fact is that we can breathe a huge sigh of relief that Kennedy died instantly. Had he been comatose for God knows how long, then by definition he'd be alive. And in 1963, there was no procedure in place for what you do with the comatose president. We had actually seen earlier incidents of this with regard to the assassinations of Garfield and William McKinley. Lincoln died almost immediately, but Garfield and McKinley lingered. And who knows exactly what was going on then, but that was a simpler era, and we just got along. And quite remarkably, Woodrow Wilson's debilitating stroke in 1919, which in many ways was far more serious even than the Garfield-McKinley assassinations, that was accepted almost mindlessly. And for about a year and a half, the de facto president of the United States was his wife. And other Democrats, including the vice president, basically collaborated and lied to the American people that Wilson was really functioning well. By the time of the Kennedy assassination, I think it was recognized that we had to do something. And so we got was the 25th Amendment, which, as I say, was designed to offer a way of responding to assassination attempts where the victims lingered, or a serious stroke like Woodrow Wilson. But frankly, it's not in the least designed to operate well when the problem is Donald Trump, who is certainly alive and well, but those who are opposed to Trump would describe him increasingly seriously as a sociopath. At the very least, as somebody whose judgment has been demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt to be impaired and untrustworthy. So actually, you should know, and your listeners should know, that I am probably one of the more prominent critics of the Constitution in the Academy. That would be more arrogant if there were lots of us. But the horrible truth is that very few legal academics actually spend much time thinking about some of what I call the structural problems of the Constitution, because we focus almost all of our energies on what the Supreme Court does. And quite frankly, the Supreme Court has said nothing whatsoever that's of any help at all with something like the 25th Amendment. So I would be much, much happier if the United States Constitution had a provision in it that, let us say, allowed 2/3 of Congress meeting together, the House and the Senate meeting together, that if 2/3 of Congress declared no confidence in a sitting president, then the president is out and the vice president becomes president. A lot of systems around the world have no confidence systems. We don't. So instead, we have the impeachment clause and the 25th Amendment, neither one of which is genuinely effective for the situation we face right now. So to focus on the 25th Amendment, we have quite a few people, mainly Democrats, but actually a few Republicans, who agree that Mike Pence would be a far, far better president for the remaining 13 days before Joe Biden becomes president on the 20th. But the text of the amendment of Section 4 leaves it really up in the air for lawyers to shout at one another about how it would actually operate. For, as I say, what the amendment assumed was physical debility, a heart attack, a stroke, being shot in an assassination attempt. Donald Trump has no physical debilities. His debilities are mental. And that's, a new world to be discussing. So,
well, Professor Levinson, just to interrupt you just for a second, I mean, from what the discussion has been and the reporting has been, is that somehow the Vice President and Cabinet could come to an agreement to invoke this 25th Amendment. Can you talk about what that would involve exactly?
Sure. Yeah, what they would have to do is to agree that the president, quote, is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, unquote. So the first question that a lawyer would ask, and incidentally, my criticism of the 25th Amendment, the impeachment clause, is that they've been taken over by lawyers. One of the advantages of a no confidence provision is that lawyers would have almost nothing to say about the operation of that. But the first question that a lawyer would raise is, what does one mean by, quote, unable to discharge the duties? If the person is in a coma, then there's no problem. But is Donald Trump unable to discharge the duties, or is it simply that lots and lots of people are, for very good reasons, scared stiff about how he might use the powers he has as president of the United States? But let's assume that we get through that hurdle and we agree that unable to discharge means that you're scared stiff that the president is basically, to use a highly scientific word, bonkers, and that you're just not willing to trust the decisions that he might make. So then the question becomes, okay, what do you need in order to declare that the president is unfit? It appears to be the case that you need here I'm quoting again, a majority of either the principal officers of the executive department or of such other body as Congress may by law provide. Okay, Congress, as usual, has done nothing whatsoever to provide anything other than the majority of the principal officers of the executive department. They've had 50 years of opportunity to think about this, and zero. Okay, so we have to talk about what the majority of the principal officers of the executive department means. There are, I think, something like 21 cabinet officials right now. So does that mean that you need 11, assuming there are 21, does that mean you need 11 out of the 21, plus presumably the vice president, because the text says the vice president and a majority, not merely a majority. So you also have the problem, just yesterday, Secretary Chow and Secretary DeVos resigned as cabinet officers. So right now we don't have a confirmed Secretary of Transportation or a confirmed Secretary of Education. But you know what? We don't have a confirmed Secretary of Defense. We don't have a confirmed Attorney General, because Donald Trump has made a habit of firing officials and then not really submitting their names to the Senate for confirmation. So are all of these acting heads of departments the principal officers, or do you need to be confirmed by the Senate? Now, lawyers argue with one another about this. There is some argument citing respectable sources, the Office of Legal Counsel in the Justice Department, saying, well, all you need to be is the acting cabinet official. You don't need to be confirmed. Other lawyers, no doubt, can say, well, if we're going to talk about something so monumental as firing a president, not because he's in a coma, but because you think he's bonkers and you don't trust his judgment, maybe, just maybe, you would want people with a stature that enable them to get Senate confirmation. But as I say, we're talking about basically unexplored territory. But Mike Pence has already said that he's not interested in becoming president. And so he has an absolute veto. It could be the case in theory that all 21 of the cabinet heads, the confirmed secretaries, the unconfirmed acting heads of departments, that all of them could say, we need to get rid of Donald Trump and name Mike Pence as president. That wouldn't be good enough unless Pence agrees. So that's the first huge problem in trying to make sense of Section 4.
Given all those caveats that you've explained, how likely is it? I think this is the base question that everybody really wants to know. How likely is it that the 25th Amendment would be invoked to remove President Trump or any sitting president? Is that even possible? Is it in a realm of possibilities at this point?
Well, you're asking two different questions.
Okay.
Any sitting president could include a sitting president in a coma.
Yes.
Or Woodrow Wilson, with the debilitating stroke. And then I would hope that the answer is very likely, because it would be crazy to say, well, he might be really debilitated by a stroke, but that's good enough for us. The real question you're asking, and it is quite literally the question of the hour, is whether one can imagine this being applied to Donald J. Trump in the next 13 days or next 12 days. And the honest answer is your guess is as good as mine. But I will say that the answer is zero chance if Mike Pence doesn't agree to lead the revolt. So long as he remains lapdog loyal to Donald Trump, then we're simply spinning castles in the air. It simply will not take place. If Pence, on the other hand, should get a phone call from, let's say, Lindsey Graham, stranger things have happened. But if he got a call from somebody like Lindsey Graham saying, look, enough is enough. The guy really is bonkers. And there is a bipartisan consensus. Democrats will be delighted to welcome you as the 46th president of the United States for the next 10 days. Do it. Then I think it might become highly likely. But it really all depends, for starters, on Mike Pence.
And before we let you go, thank you so much for, again, taking time out of your day to do this for us. You've touched on it a little bit earlier, though. Talk about the introduction of this particular amendment. What was the motivation for passing it and approving it some 50 years ago?
Yeah. John Kennedy. I think it's pretty much as simple as that. That Birch Bayh, then from Indiana, was one of the few senators who took any interest in structural provisions in the Constitution. I will say, incidentally, I'm not a big fan of Senator Cornyn politically, but I want to give an affirmative shout out to Senator Cornyn because he actually co-sponsored a proposed constitutional amendment, which has gone nowhere, that would, in fact, alleviate the obvious and foreseeable problems that would have arisen if Flight 93 had crashed into the Capitol on September 11th. But Senator Cornyn's proposal has gone nowhere because it's not sexy. It doesn't bring in campaign contributions. Most members of the House of Representatives are actually opposed to it for reasons we need not go into. And so, we're now up to almost the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and we still face the so-called continuity in government problem should the Capitol be attacked as it was on September 11th. So now you have this continuity in government problem, which Birch Bayh was sensitive to. And it was fairly obvious in the 1960s that if Kennedy had merely been severely injured and lingered for God knows how long, the country would have been worse off than if he died immediately, which he did, so that Lyndon Johnson could in fact be inaugurated as Kennedy's successor on November 22nd and speak to the country that weekend to reassure us that the government of the United States was still functioning. So that's what Bayh is responding to, and that's what the 25th Amendment purports to solve. And as I say, it arguably does the trick if you're thinking about unsuccessful presidential assassinations that leave the victims lingering for weeks or months. It does nothing really to respond effectively to the problem of the bonkers president.
Again, everybody, you've been listening to a professor at the University of Texas at Austin's School of Law, Professor Sandy Levinson. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to tell you before we go, there has been reporting that articles of impeachment could be introduced as early as Monday in the House of Representatives. Before we go, do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, it would not surprise me if the House did that and if they voted that afternoon to try him. But I'm sorry, to impeach him. But then the question, and this is why I'm not any more of a fan of the impeachment clause than I am of the 25th Amendment. I want a no confidence provision. If the House impeaches, it goes to the Senate. And so, let me toss out a question for your listeners. Who is majority leader of the Senate? The answer to that question until January 20th is Mitch McConnell. It's not Chuck Schumer. Will Mitch McConnell move with dispatch to hold a trial in the Senate? Will other Republicans besides Mitt Romney and possibly Ben Sasse and a few others we might name right now, will they be willing to convict? Or will we discover once again, as we did last January, that the impeachment clause is next to useless? Or as we discovered, for that matter, in January of 1999, when Bill Clinton had been impeached and then was acquitted by the Senate, in fact, partly or overwhelmingly because the Democrats had the votes to acquit. So will the impeachment clause turn out to be yet one more display of what Shakespeare called sound and fury, ultimately signifying nothing? So that's my answer to your question.
All right, Professor Levinson, thank you again very, very much. There is so much to keep our eyes on and report on, and so much is changing. So we appreciate you joining us for this time.
It's been my pleasure, except for the topic we're talking about.
Yes. All right, Professor Sandy Levinson with UT Austin School of Law. We appreciate it. Everyone, thank you all for watching our stream. I'm Will DuPree, once again here in the KXAN live studio. Please be safe, be careful out there, and take care. We'll see you back here another time.